starting clearly from the international situation that we are experiencing and from Italy's international position, a position which, it is worth remembering, was not invented by this government, but has been the same for about 80 years. I say this to respond in advance that the now predictable refrain about my subordination to President Trump is acted out, or the even more predictable one titled, "Meloni must choose between Trump and Europe." Here, too, I will explain my point of view again, but I also take the opportunity to ask for some clarification, because Italy's position in the Iranian crisis was exactly the same as that of the main European countries. So I ask myself, and ask you, whether, when it is said that we must stand with Europe, it really means Europe, or rather the European left, even when this means dividing Europe, because I fear that the two things do not go together, and I clearly await a response with confidence. Meanwhile, as you know, in the night between Tuesday and Wednesday, a temporary ceasefire was agreed upon between Iran, the United States, and their respective allies in the conflict that began last February 28th. We have come to the brink of the point of no return, but now we have a faint prospect of peace ahead of us, which must be pursued with determination. Italy expresses its applause to the President of Pakistan, Sharif, who has taken on this difficult negotiation with the support of other regional actors. Now, we hope that the peace talks that will begin in a few hours in Islamabad can strengthen the general points of the agreement and incorporate the priorities that Italy, along with its European partners, has supported from the very first day. In the same way, of course, we firmly condemn any form of ceasefire violation, permanent cessation of hostilities, cessation of attacks towards the Gulf countries, cessation of military operations in Lebanon, Iran's abandonment of its nuclear program, and the constant threat towards regional neighbors and beyond. Full restoration of freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, which must not be subject to any form of restriction, as it seems to have happened in recent hours. This remains one of the most critical points during the implementation of the agreement, because if Iran were to succeed in obtaining the ability to apply extra tariffs on transits in the strait, this could still lead to economic consequences with unpredictable shifts in commercial flows. Therefore, it is of paramount interest for Italy and its European and Western partners that freedom of navigation be fully restored to the conditions prior to February 28 in order to normalize the tense situation in the energy markets, critical raw materials, fertilizers, and other essential products for our economy. On this point, we are already working with the Coalition for the Strait of Hormuz, promoted by the United Kingdom, in which over 30 countries are participating, to try to build security conditions that allow for the full restoration of freedom of navigation and supply, a contribution which we believe is important in this negotiating phase. This positive glimpse of resolving the crisis with Iran, however, does not diminish the need for a more comprehensive approach that we have a duty to address, because it is undeniable that we are experiencing a moment of particular difficulty in the relations between Europe and the United States, but it is equally undeniable that the current American administration has accelerated a path that had been widely announced by previous administrations, both Republican and Democratic, to progressively shift focus away from Europe to engage in global competition with China, thus choosing the Indo-Pacific as a strategic area, a geostrategic priority, a clear trajectory that European leaderships of the recent past have, in my view, culpably long preferred not to grasp, including those who governed in Italy and who were content with a pat on the back or a tweet of endorsement when forming a new government. In short, history knocks, and Europe is called upon not to fail this test, and to do so must know how to adapt its strategy to a world that changes at the speed of light, putting the principle of reality before bureaucratic superstructures and ideological dogmas. It is from this perspective that our relentless commitment in Brussels should be seen for the support of competitiveness, for bureaucratic simplification, for a green transition that is realistic and not ideological, for a balanced strategic autonomy that gradually reduces our dependencies, and for a capacity of defense that does not make us dependent on our American allies, as is evidently proposed by those who oppose greater investments in security. To make Europe stronger, more effective, quicker, more pragmatic, more focused on the citizens' issues and the real challenges posed by the world around us. This is our portion of responsibility. That is, before we expect something from others, let's try to really take care of ourselves. Then there is the United States, the other side of the coin, because what we define as the West stands on two legs, the European leg and the North American leg. If the two legs do not move in the same direction, the West is destined for paralysis and ultimately irrelevance. I continue to believe in the need to work to ensure unity of the West, a point I have strongly supported since a very different administration was in the White House. I would be inclined to say, borrowing a phrase dear to the Honorable Schlein, that we are stubbornly united, and if she can afford to be so regarding the various political forces that make up the broad camp, then I can certainly afford to be so regarding Europe. And the United States, who have been together for a very, very long time. We are stubbornly Western, because only if the West is united can it be a force capable of making its voice heard on the world stage. And because without that unity, we, not others, would be weaker. But obviously, to stay together, both parties must want it. And that is why, in the relationship with the United States, we must be clear, work to keep both sides of the Atlantic together, to work to strengthen NATO, which on one hand serves as a political platform where the interests of America and Europe are reconciled, and on the other hand is an essential geostrategic and military tool in which Europe must take on its own responsibilities, bravely build the European pillar of the alliance to ensure its own security first and foremost. And speaking of communicating clearly with partners, that is also what we have done with Israel regarding Lebanon. We have supported the Lebanese government, its territorial sovereignty, and its commitment to disarm Hezbollah's terrorist militias, and for this, we have repeatedly asked Israel to stop the military escalation, ensure the safety of the UNIFIL mission personnel, to which Italy has been providing its indispensable contribution for decades, and allow the return of an excessively large number of people, of displaced people, and also to avoid the risk of resuming migratory flows towards Europe.